Part 27. A Sledgehammer Breaks into Pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 261. Admiralty Marineford. At this time, in the office of the Warring States General, several Navy bosses were gathering together to discuss something. The guys from the CP agency have already investigated O'Hara clearly. There is no doubt that all O'Hara scholars are involved in this matter, and Dr. Clover is the mastermind. The Warring States General was sitting on the sofa, holding an encrypted document in his hand, and said softly. Opposite him, the big boss Sci-fi was sitting. But at this time, strictly speaking, he had resigned and would no longer he became the Admiral of the Navy. But the world government just wanted to find someone responsible for Impelton. They knew exactly what the Impelton incident was. So after Sci-fi took the blame and resigned, there was not long after, he was re-employed by the Navy. He still retained the rank of general, but did not hold any actual duties. Instead, he went to work as an instructor in the Navy's officer training camp. As a result, from a superficial point of view, today's Navy headquarters Marineford has 2 vacant generals with real power, and only 1 naval admiral from the Warring States period. However, every time there is a major event in the Navy, Sci-fi will still be invited to participate. After all, he has served as an admiral for so many years, and now he is no longer after losing a hand, his strength has gone down, and his physical fitness is not good, but after all, his experience lies in it, and he is a very experienced person. In addition, he has a high prestige in the Navy, and he is the master of everyone, even if he is not a powerful general. He won't be looked down upon. After hearing what Warring States said, Sci-fi also sighed helplessly. He hated O'Hara. What are you scholars doing to get involved in this kind of thing? Okay now. Now that the incident has been revealed, the world government cannot spare you, and our Navy cannot pretend not to see it. What does it say above? Sci-fi asked. The Warring States General raised the confidential document in his hand, and then said the forbidden history is related to the bottom line of the world government. Although O'Hara is a holy place for scholars and the hometown of archaeology, they will ultimately it has violated this bottom line. As an autonomous island within the franchised country system, it has seriously violated the laws of the world government, and it can be regarded as knowing the law and breaking the law, and the crime is increased by 1 degree. The system of self-governing islands and the world government is very large. There are not only nearly 200 participating countries, but also many special self-governing islands, which are also protected by the world government. These autonomous islands also have similar rights and interests as the franchised countries. Although they will not be invited when the World Conference opens, if they want to participate, they can apply, and there is almost a high probability that they will be approved. An archaeological holy place like O'Hara is an autonomous island, and the shipbuilding Holy Land of 7 Waters is also an autonomous island. Correspondingly, these autonomous islands have almost no power to defend themselves, and they all rely on the protection of the world government. Because of this, the world government trusts these autonomous islands more than the participating countries with military strength and mature political systems. After all, it is difficult to develop a mature political system on these islands, and there is almost no force to resist the world government. But now O'Hara has slapped the world government hard on the ear. Tisk, Cusin smacked his lips first, and then said then it seems that O'Hara can no longer be kind. As soon as he finished speaking, the Warring States General nodded and said the world government decided to kill O'Hara. Order, erase all existence of O'Hara, and the CP agency will cooperate with our Navy in this demon slaying. As soon as the Warring States General finished speaking, the senior Navy generals fell silent. The demon slaying order is one of the Navy's important military methods. It has been rarely used in recent years. After all, in the Navy, the only ones with the authority to issue the demon-slaying order are the admiral and the marshal. There was one less general before, and Sci-fi, Sengoku, and Cyborg were not bloodthirsty naval admirals, so they rarely used the demon-slaying order. This time, the world government gave a direct order, asking the Navy headquarters to kill O'Hara. I have to say that this name is very unpleasant. After all, O'Hara is a holy place for archaeology. They are all scholars and there is no resistance. The Navy's massacre of demons there looked like a massacre from the outside. This is a bad reputation for the Navy, and the worst thing is the Warring States period. Sci-fi is no longer the powerful general of the Navy, so naturally he cannot launch something like the demon-slaying order. Among the Navy, the only ones with the right to issue a massacre order were Sengoku and Cyborg. The Navy Marshal couldn't be the one to launch the demon-slaying order against O'Hara's group of intellectuals, right? The impact was even worse, so the only one who could take the blame was the Warring States period. Every time he thinks of this, Warring States feels helpless. Damn, what the hell is this? Although the top brass of the Navy have objections to this demon-slaying order, if you think about it carefully, the world government has not exceeded anything and acted completely in accordance with the law. Their Navy should also abide by this order, so although this demon-slaying order seems a bit unjust, the Navy still has to accept it. What about the crime? How to convict O'Hara? What's the crime? Research Taboo Ancient History, General Ahe asked. The Warring States general shook his head, and then said the world government does not want to mention the blank 100 years of history too much and downplay the impact of this aspect, so the conviction of O'Hara is, trying to decipher ancient texts, resurrect ancient weapons that can destroy the world, and try to subvert world peace. It's really ruthless, and O'Hara's reputation will be completely ruined. Sci-fi was stunned for a moment and said. Now, O'Hara is an archaeological holy land, but once this charge is withheld and certified by the world government, the ordinary people in the sea will definitely believe it. By then, O'Hara will not be what kind of holy place is it? It's probably the Devil's Cave. In fact, it was indeed the case later. O'Hara's only survivor, Nicole Robin, became the son of the devil because of this. But, this is not an unfounded crime. Warring States nodded and said. The other naval generals also nodded. Ancient texts and historical texts involve more than just a blank 100 years of history. There is also a huge threat, which is said to be able to destroy the world. Ancient weapons. There are many people who covet this kind of power, such as Shiji, who started the Advocate naval battle with Roger because of this thing. The Navy also has reason to believe that Kaido, Charlotte Lingling, these people must also be very interested in ancient weapons. Therefore, thinking about this, my original sympathy for O'Hara has faded a lot. These scholars are really lawless. Perhaps they study ancient texts and historical texts for the purpose of exploring that blank 100 years of history will not be of interest to ancient weapons or anything like that. But the problem is, once the news that they cracked the ancient text is leaked to those big pirates, then O'Hara's scholars will inevitably become a piece of cake in the eyes of pirates. If a few scholars who know ancient texts are caught, who can guarantee that they will not reveal anything in the hands of pirates? Especially Charlotte Lingling, she is playing with the soul. The masters may have some strange methods. There are also various strange devil fruit abilities in the sea, such as superhuman memory fruits and so on. Therefore, the Navy has reason to believe that once these scholars fall into the hands of pirates, in their hands, the pirates have a high probability of getting the secrets of the ancient writings. By then, if they find the ancient weapons and resurrect them, it will have a disastrous impact on the entire world. So from a macro perspective, looking at the situation of the entire world, it is completely reasonable to completely wipe out O'Hara and cleanse it with the demon-slaying order. It is not worthy of sympathy. Because O'Hara holds the key that can destroy the world, as the saying goes, this is the reason why the common man is not guilty, but he who is pregnant with the treasure is guilty. After thinking about this matter carefully, Kuzan, who was still a little uncomfortable at first, couldn't help but said, looking at it this way, those scholars in O'Hara are really, You're looking for death. Don't they consider the consequences before doing something? Sci-fi couldn't help but say. They say that history is a treasure that belongs to all mankind, but they don't look at what kind of waves this will bring to the world in the future. Compared with the risk of world destruction, history, it doesn't seem that important anymore. Consultant Ahe also nodded and responded. The duty of eradicating evil is over. Since O'Hara's scholars have touched the red line of this law and are still at risk of bringing destruction to the world, they must kill them all. I see no problem with the world government's decision this time. Demon-slaying order, our navy must implement it to the end, Sakaski suddenly said in a deep voice. Before, when he had not thought about the ancient weapons, although Sakaski recognized the necessity of the demon-slaying order, he still felt that it was a bit too strong. To deal with a group of scholars, what about the demon-slaying order? But now, when he thinks about how much risk this group of scholars has brought to the world by studying ancient texts, and has brought the possibility and key to the evil party to destroy the world, Sakaski completely thinks about it. Got it? He wants to drive out all these scholars, maintain absolute justice, and maintain the stability of the sea and the peace of the world. The Warring States General glanced at Sakaski thoughtfully, then withdrew his gaze and said, "Okay, now, the demon-slaying order is imperative. This time, I will initiate the demon-slaying order, and I will be the one who executes it." Having said this, the Warring States General paused for a moment, and then continued, "Sakaski and Kyuzan, you two, lead Flying Squirrel, Sorrow and Hwashaishin together, cooperate with the CP agency, and massacre Ohapol." "Yes, everything is for justice." Kyuzan and Sakaski responded at the same time. Then, the Warring States General took out a golden phone bug from the drawer and handed it to Sakaski. Kyuzan didn't think much about it and just thought it was Sakaski. The position where G was sitting was just closer to the Warring States General, and the Warring States General gave it to him casually. Anyway, Kyuzan didn't care about this. As for the demon-slaying order, does it matter who will dial the golden phone bug? Sakaski was a little surprised. He glanced at the Warring States General, and then their eyes met, and they seemed to understand something. Sakaski took the golden phone bug, put it in his arms, and made up his mind. The Warring States General did not say anything. What? He picked up the teacup and took a sip, as if nothing happened. It must be said that although Senguo was a Dove-style navy, he was also very cold-hearted at times. He had to do his best to eliminate evil. No matter how small the possibility of this matter is about the destruction of the entire world, the Warring States period will not be merciful in the slightest. This is the justice that reigns over the world in his heart. A sledgehammer breaks into pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 262. During the same period at the Navy headquarters, Kyuzan, Porisalino, Sakaski and others were the first batch of players after Durag left. Those who were slightly behind them were people like Jun and Cake who would become general candidates in the future. Then, there are the naval generals such as Flying Squirrel, Huo Shaoshan, Stolobelly, Ghost Spider, and Doberman. Among these generals, in today's era, the more outstanding ones, such as Flying Squirrel, Huo Shaoshan, Ghost Spider, etc., have become lieutenant generals of the Navy headquarters. Officially entered the ranks of senior generals of the Navy. Stolobelly, Doberman, and others are a little worse than them, and are currently only major generals. This time, the Warring States generals meant that Kyuzan and Sakaski would take the lead in this demon-slaying order, and the 5 lieutenant generals composed of Flying Squirrel, Hwashaishin, and Sorrow would slay O'Hara. To be honest, if it weren't for the fact that Savulo, the lieutenant general of the giant clan, was deeply involved in this matter, the Warring States general would actually prefer Lieutenant General Ghost Spider to go with him. After receiving the order, Sakaski went to notify Flying Squirrel and Huo Shaoshan. As for Kyuzan, he went to inform his good friend Sorrow. The configuration of the demon-slaying order seems simple, but is actually very powerful. It is completely enough for the Navy to launch a huge war against the country. The complete configuration of the entire demon-slaying order consists of 10 huge warships from the Navy headquarters. Each warship is equipped with 1,000 elite Navy officers and officers, only a few more. At the same time, there are 5 elite lieutenant generals from the Navy headquarters, and 10 elite major generals at the assistant level of lieutenant general. Therefore, the entire demon-slaying order is roughly composed of 5 lieutenant generals and 10 rear admirals from the Navy headquarters, leading 10,000 elite naval officers and 10 huge warships. This lineup is indeed enough to kill most of the forces at sea. The demon-slaying order is vaguely divided into 2 levels. The difference between the 2 levels lies in the presence or absence of the naval admiral. O'Hara's demon-slaying order was aimed at scholars who were powerless, so the Warring States General had no intention of passing it. 20 years later, when the demon-slaying order was launched against the Straw Hat Pirates on Judiciary Island, General Cusin was also not present. Because in the view of the Navy headquarters, these 2 demon-slaying orders were low-level demon-slaying orders. And once the general also participates in it and activates the golden phone bug himself, the level of the demon-slaying order will instantly rise. Even against the top pirate group, it has enough deterrence, and can still compete with the Whitebeard pirates. Because of this, the demon-slaying order is known as the Navy's strongest regular lineup. The power of the demon-slaying order also just demonstrates the Navy's stable position as the maritime hegemon. When Cusin found Sorrow was having a barbecue. He hunted a sea beast around the Marineford Sea and took his subordinates to a barbecue banquet. Recently, Sorrow's mood has not been very high. His justice for himself and the justice of the Navy has been vaguely shaken. The reason for this wavering was the O'Hara incident. Cusin's words and Nicole Albia's words completely plunged him into chaos. He doesn't know whether what he said is right or not. You are really in a good mood. Cusin walked up to Sorrow, joked with a smile, took the kebab from a Navy lieutenant, sat casually on the ground, and started chatting with Sorrow. There's nothing that barbecue can't solve. Sorrow laughed and said. Yeah? Then eat more, you will be busy soon. Cusin said very casually. Sorrow was stunned for a moment, then asked, what are you busy with? Didn't you say you would give me 2 months vacation? Lieutenant General Sorrow led his men to capture scholars at sea for so long, although it has never played a big role. But this is the problem of the intelligence department and has nothing to do with him. Even if he has no credit, it also involves hard work. Therefore, at the headquarters meeting not long ago, a 2-month vacation was arranged for him. At this time, Cusin said this, and he was a little strange. Yeah? Cusin murmured first, and then said, you can rest after this mission is over. The Warring States General has given new orders. Although Sorrow was a little helpless, he still nodded. After all, as a soldier, emergencies can happen at any time. It is normal for holidays to be cancelled or postponed occasionally. Well, I have plenty of time anyway, so it doesn't matter if I take a late break. Sorrow said with a smile. The lifespan of the giants is usually about 3 times that of humans. A healthy giant can easily live to be 300 years old as long as he does not die unexpectedly. Those who live longer can even live to 350 years old. Work hard from 10 years old, or even 400 years old. Therefore, their concept of time is not particularly sensitive. Occasionally, a battle may last 3 to 5 years. Even 100 years of war has not never happened. After a short pause, Sorrow asked, what mission? What does the Warring States General want us to do? Are the 2 of us joining forces? Ha 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 ha, yes, it's the 2 of us joining forces, and it's not just the 2 of us. It's been a long time since I've fought together with you. Cusin smiled at first. Then, his eyes darkened and he said in a low voice, it's O'Hara's business. Sorrow's expression changed slightly, he took a bite of the huge barbecue and asked softly, O'Hara? What was the final arrangement above? Demon-slaying order. Kyuzin said concisely and concisely. As soon as he finished speaking, Savulona paused while tearing the barbecue, and then asked with some surprise, devil-slaying order, targeting a group of scholars and using the demon-slaying order? What's the point? O'Hara has the possibility of destroying the world, and he knows the law and breaks the law, and the crime is increased. The world government decides to completely erase O'Hara's existence and execute all scholars. Kyuzin also said with some emotion. Do not make jokes. Is this what the Navy should do? Saro said angrily. Kyuzin looked at the angry Saro and was stunned for a moment, but soon understood his thoughts. After all, if he didn't know the reasons, he had also treated Oha just like Saro before. Law had great sympathy. But this involved taboos on ancient weapons and ancient texts. Kyuzin did not want to explain anything more, so he could only console him. Soldiers must obey orders as their bounden duty. Saro, this matter is behind the scenes, it can't be explained clearly in just a few sentences. In short, the order has been issued. Once the demon-slaying order fleet is ready, let's set off. The scale of the demon-slaying order is very large, and it has not been launched for a long time. Of course, it needs to be prepared. Saro looked at Kyuzin with some gloomy eyes. After all, he did not continue to get angry. He grabbed the barbecue and took 2 bites, and put it in his mouth. Chewing hard, as if he was venting his anger. After taking 2 bites, Kyuzin felt it was boring. He stood up, patted his butt, and said, anyway, that's it? Eat more, there's nothing wrong with it. Barbecue can solve the problem. If so, just eat more. I'll leave first. Saro didn't speak, but nodded. Kyuzin didn't care about this, smiled at him, and left. After Kyuzin left, Saro ate 2 more bites of barbecue, but he always felt some of them were tasteless, and they were obviously fragrant, but when they were eaten in the mouth, they tasted like chewing gum. The anger in his heart was getting stronger and stronger, and he began to doubt the justice of the Navy headquarters. After a long time, Saro suddenly he threw the barbecue into the sea, and his subordinates looked at him in confusion. Saro waved his hand and said, I won't eat, I have other things to do, you don't need to worry about me, just continue. After that, Saro turned and left. He did not prepare for the demon-slaying order, but walked into the Navy prison. At this time, Nicole Albia was still in Saro. Within the jurisdiction of the Navy, he was the person in charge of the interrogation. Since it was Saro who captured Albia, the Navy did not suspect Saro at all. Moreover, the Vice Admiral defected from the Navy headquarters. This is something that has not been seen once in more than 100 years. Who would think like this to a normal person? Abandoning his future in the Navy for a group of scholars who committed crimes. After Orbia's value has become less, the Navy, his attention to her has also become much indifferent. Saro is still very kind in his heart. Although Albia was interrogated and tortured, there was plenty of food and drink for the rest of the time. So, Albia's condition is not particularly bad. With her feet and hands cuffed, Albia is sitting in the prison cell, watching Saro's huge figure walking over. Maybe it's my death day, Albia thought so, with a look of disdain on his face. A true historian is never afraid of death. This may be her creed. Although it seems a bit silly, it is indeed brave. Saro looked at the tiny Albia, standing in front of the cage, and was silent for a long time. What should you do if you feel confused? Saro suddenly asked. Albia was stunned for a moment, but before she could speak, Saro continued, you are a scholar, you should know a lot, right? I'm just a rough guy, so I ask you, what should you do if you feel confused? Albia was silent for a while, and then said, follow your instincts and find your own direction, so as to break through the confusion and find yourself. Saro's eyes were fixed on Albia, and his breathing gradually became heavier. In the quiet prison, his fierce heartbeat could be heard. "O'Hara is going to die," Sorrow suddenly spoke again. A look of surprise flashed in Albia's eyes, and he quickly asked, "What do you mean? Didn't I tell you everything? It's just some of us scholars who are pursuing the historical text. You can't even fool me. Why do you want to fool the world government?" Sorrow said with a self-deprecating laugh. Albia wanted to say something else. But Sorrow interrupted her and said, "It's useless to tell me. The world government ordered our navy to carry out a demon-slaying order against O'Hara. As a scholar, you should understand what a demon-slaying order is, right? How can you do this? O'Hara is a holy place for historians and a treasure of human culture. How much knowledge is there in the Tree of Omniscience?" Albia asked angrily. She panicked. She was not afraid of death, and when she set out on the road to find the historical text, she had already made up her mind to die as a martyr. But she was afraid that O'Hara would be destroyed, and that knowledge would be destroyed, because they were really the treasures of mankind. Scholars like her may be really blind and arrogant, or they may be really stupid and self-righteous. But in the final analysis, what they think in their hearts is still kind and bright. What they do may be wrong, but their original intention is indeed beautiful. They are willing to dedicate their lives for humanity, and are also willing to find the truth for O'Hara. Therefore, they value human culture and history more than anything else, and O'Hara is naturally among them. "How could I know?" Sorrow suddenly roared angrily. Albia sat down on the ground in shock. Sorrow's eyes were flashing red, and his expression became more and more angry. After working in the Navy for so many years, the justice that he has believed in for so many years has been shaken. How can Sorrow's own pain be lighter than that of Albia? The most painful time for a person is when his faith collapses and the past is denied. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. A sledgehammer breaks into pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 263. The Warring States General was alone in his office at this time, holding a chart in his hand and looking at O'Hara's logo, feeling a little irritated and unbearable. He knew that Sakaski was a smart man. He handed the golden phone bug to him, and he must have understood the meaning of it. But every time he thought about what happened next, the Warring States General felt a little depressed. O'Hara's demon-slaying order was issued by him, although this was to maintain law and order and the security of the world. But in the end, the demon-slaying order was still too violent and deviated from the Navy's justice. Alas, this was a sin in the end, the Warring States General murmured softly. O'Hara is too special. He can't let go of the ancient weapons and the crisis of destroying the world. But the matter has come to this, and the Warring States General doesn't want to hesitate anymore. To be weak towards O'Hara is to be irresponsible to the world. As a naval admiral, he carries out the justice of ruling the world in his heart. The Warring States period naturally puts the world first and safeguards the interests of the vast majority of people. This scene is exactly what Orgrim thought. Where can there be any absolute between good and evil, justice or injustice? It is nothing more than the unity of opposites. This is the truth of the world. Just when the Warring States General was thinking about all this, suddenly a naval lieutenant commander hurriedly knocked on his door. The Warring States General responded, and then the Navy lieutenant commander walked in. He first gave a military salute, and then quickly said, "General, the intelligence department has important information." "Explain," the Warring States General said with a serious expression. "It is reported that Hosgarot Orgrim left the New World, and intelligence showed that he, Jorikar Mihawk, and Lakeless Hank appeared in the Western Sea, and their specific whereabouts are unknown," the naval lieutenant commander hurriedly reported the report. As soon as he finished speaking, the Warring States General was stunned. Because Orgrim is very strange. As a free pirate, he seems to have the characteristics of an otaku. With his attributes, he almost never runs around. And every time he appears on the sea, it must have a special purpose, and he often turns the sea upside down. At this moment, he suddenly ran away to the West Sea, and the Warring States period was in the heart of the Warring States period. Can you not panic? The current Western Sea is a place of turmoil. And Orgrim was the trigger of the O'Hara incident. The world government and the Navy headquarters were able to remove O'Hara so quickly. He was caught behind the scenes because Orgrim showed his strength. Before, Orgrim didn't do anything, and the Warring States General didn't think much about it. But now Orgrim suddenly went to the West Sea, and the Warring States General was deeply afraid that this bastard was targeting him. Scholars went there, fearing that this guy would get some useful information from the scholars, resurrect ancient weapons, etc. Quick, have someone keep an eye on O'Hara, the intelligence department will contact the CP agency, and both parties will work together to find out Orgrim's whereabouts as quickly as possible. Check the New World, are the other leaders of the Warhammer pirates there? The demon-slaying fleet sets out immediately, the Warring States General quickly ordered. After a short pause, he felt that he could not underestimate Orgrim this time, so he added inform Jun and Porisalino to come see me now. The Navy Lieutenant Commander was stunned by the series of orders from the Warring States Admiral, but he quickly came to his senses and quickly went to deliver the order. The Warring States Admiral was a little upset at this time, and the demon-slaying fleet must immediately set off, but with only Sakaski, Porisalino, and the other 3 lieutenant generals, the Warring States General is really worried. It's okay without Orgrim. If there is Orgrim in the West Sea, this special, how could such things be stable? So he immediately decided that he would enter the venue in person. The Marshal once ordered that any action against Orgrim must have 2 admiral-level combat capabilities in place. The Warring States period, the General also thinks so, but currently, among the Navy's general-level combat capabilities, Sci-fi has lost one of his hands, and that guy Garp is still in the South China Sea. He can't take the Marshal with him, can he? What's going on? As for Ahe, if it were the case, he had just gone to Marjoya for business and couldn't afford to delay it. So he thought about it carefully and immediately decided to set off with Porisalino and the garden as backup. To be honest, he had to. It's not just the matter of Garp supervising Roger's bloodline in the South China Sea. Coupled with the Darag incident, Garp's current situation is very embarrassing. This time, the matter is cooperating with the CP agency. With Garp after coming back, not to mention cooperation, not to fight, but to pray to the gods, okay. If there were not all these factors, the Warring States period would have asked Garp to rush from the South China Sea to the West Sea immediately. But now, I go with Porisalino, Sakaski, Kuzan, Jun, and others. If there are only Orgrim and Mihawk, they should be able to cover them. There is no requirement to kill them, as long as they are stable. Just stay in O'Hara's demon-slaying order and don't let Orgrim take any chances in it. As for Lakeless Hank, General Sengoku didn't take him seriously at all. After all, in Sengoku's view, he was just a little person who carried the hammer for Orgrim. I was a little anxious when I heard the news, but now I calmed down, and the Warring States General relaxed a little. Maybe Orgrim went to the West Sea, wasn't it because of O'Hara's matter? After all, he was the first to know that O'Hara was studying ancient writings. If he really had any ideas, he should have taken action long ago, right? There was no need for it. Should you tell the world government these things? Should you tell them the Navy? He stretched out his hand and scratched his head, and the Warring States General murmured softly, that guy, what on earth do you want to do? Before General Sengoku could figure this out, suddenly another naval lieutenant commander ran in. This time he didn't even knock on the door, and his expression was very panicked. General Sengoku looked at this scene, and his heart sank. Damn it! Couldn't it be that Orgrim had already taken action? Before he could ask the question, the Navy lieutenant commander said in a panic. General of the Warring States period, something happened to the demon-slaying order fleet. Hagovaldi Lieutenant General Sorrow defected from prison with Nicole Albia. He also destroyed 2 warships in the port and blocked the entrance to the sea with warships. Warring States' eyes darkened when he heard the news. He was so confused that he almost spat out a mouthful of blood. Vice Admiral of the Navy defected? This is such a shame. When Durag left the Navy, he even left a resignation letter at least. That bastard, Sorrow, just forcibly defected? He also took away O'Hara's prisoner Nicole Albia, and destroyed 2 warships. This special O. It's really raining all night. Orgrim appeared in the West Sea, and Sorrow defected. There are many factors in this, and there is a high possibility that O'Hara will related. This is very complicated in the Warring States period. Lieutenant General Ghost Spider quickly joined the demon-slaying order formation, filled Savulo's position, cleared and dredged the port, and the fleet immediately set off for O'Hara in the West Sea. The Warring States general took a deep breath, forced himself to calm down, and said very calmly, "If at this time, he, the Navy general, gets into chaos, then the people below will be even more at a loss." "Yes, General," the Navy lieutenant commander seemed to have found his backbone. The panic just now was swept away and he responded quickly. "Let the gendarmerie of the headquarters be dispatched immediately, and Sorrow and Nicole Albia must be captured and brought to justice. If necessary, life or death," the Warring States general ordered again. "Yes, General," the Navy lieutenant commander responded, and then the Warring States general waved his hand, and he went to carry out the order very wisely. After the man left, Warring States stretched out his hand to rub his temples, only to feel pain in his head. He picked up a glass from the table after taking a sip of the already cold tea. The Warring States general stabilized his mind, looked out the window with blurred eyes, and murmured with a slightly painful expression, "Sorrow, this is yours, justice." Sengoku is the leader of the Dove Navy. Although Kyuzen is Garp's follower, he is also a member of Sengoku. The reason why Sorrow has a good relationship with Kyuzen is because Sorrow is also a member of the Sengoku faction. A member of Sengoku, he can be regarded as a direct descendant of Sengoku. Moreover, Sengoku also intends to use Sorrow to win over the current giant clan vice admirals of the Navy headquarters and those who will join the Navy in the future. After all, Sengoku has deep feelings. It is very clear that when the Marshal is promoted to Commander-in-Chief in the future, he will inevitably become the new Marshal of the Navy. At that time, he will not be able to do things based on factions, but will have to coordinate the 3 major factions within the Navy. He will need to balance the power of each faction. That's all. So he has to establish certain relationships with all the people in advance. Because of this time he handed over the golden phone bug to Sakaski. This can be regarded as a sign of loyalty to Sakaski, a hawk. There are some hints of being a die-hard figure in the Navy. After all, as a marshal in the future, he must put the interests of the entire Navy as his top priority. How can he consider himself the leader of a faction? The difference between a general and a marshal may seem not big, but in fact there is a huge difference. Different places. Sengoku would do this very well in the future. As for Sakaski, the reason why Sengoku later supported Kyuzen was because he believed that Sakaski was too tough and could not fully coordinate all the Navy's combat capabilities. In fact, Sakaski did not do as well as Sengoku did. When he was the marshal, the neutralist Porisalino was still a salty fish, but the dovish Navy almost completely broke with him. Fujitora General Yuxiao was forced to not even enter the naval base, which greatly broke the atmosphere of unity within the Navy. Today, the heartache of the Warring States general is that Sorrow, a direct descendant, actually defected from the Navy, and from all sides on one hand, it was a big blow to him. Not long after the demon-slaying order fleet set off, Jun and Porisalino also came to the Sengoku general's office. Jun has been concentrating on practicing his own skills recently. In terms of strength, like Kuzan and others, she is also someone who has suffered losses from Orgrim. Compared with the original story, she is more diligent and her strength has become stronger during the same period. Polo Solino's words, he just came out of the nursing home 2 days ago, and he was still thinking about how he could fish in and be lazy during this period. The result was good. It seemed that as soon as he came out, he was in trouble. You two should also know about O'Hara's affairs. The demon-slaying order fleet has already set off. You two should also make preparations. After I have arranged the things that need to be arranged later, you two will go to O'Hara with me. Pull the Warring States General didn't talk nonsense. After seeing Jun and Porosalino, he quickly ordered. Polosalino was stunned for a moment, and Jun also had a strange expression. How about dealing with a group of scholars? General? What's the meaning? The demon-slaying order is not enough, Jun asked curiously. To be prepared, the intelligence ministry gave the latest news. Kazgarot Orgrim and Jorakol Mihawk appeared in the West Sea. Although it is not sure whether they are going towards O'Hara, but we have to prepare, the Warring States General said in a deep voice. As soon as he heard Orgrim's name, Porosalino's expression changed slightly. He had just recovered from his injury. Even if he wanted to work hard, increase his strength, and develop in an all-round way. But I haven't had time to do anything yet. I couldn't defeat Orgrim before, and if I encounter it again now, I'm probably going to get hammered. But then I thought about it, this time there was a Warring States General leading the team, and the Navy was considered to be at its best. Should everything be fine? Jun, on the other hand, was different from Porosalino. After hearing Orgrim's name, he immediately became excited and in high spirits, as if he wanted to fight Orgrim for 300 rounds. A sledgehammer breaks into pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 264. Orgrim didn't know that his whereabouts had been exposed, and the Navy headquarters was even shaken by this. The Warring States General was so worried that a handful of his hair fell out, and he took another solid step towards becoming a very smart general. At this time, he, Douglas Barrett and red-haired Shanks were leaving the Kingdom of Flowers. The two parties were on the same boat and seemed to have a good relationship. In fact, this is not the case. No matter how Shanks looks at Orgrim, he feels displeased. After all, he is also an arrogant person with superior talents and talents. As the saying goes, like repels each other. When both parties intend to become the role of captain, from a standpoint, even if they are not enemies now, they will be antagonistic in the future. Under such circumstances, Shanks certainly didn't like Orgrim. Orgrim doesn't have much fondness for Shanks. From a personal point of view, he quite admires Shanks. But he also knows that it is impossible for him to have no conflicts with Shanks. There is no conflict now. In the future, Shanks will enter the New World and form his own pirate group. With his talents and abilities, he will inevitably become another opponent of him. Judging from this, Orgrim will appreciate him, but nothing else. As for whether to kill this guy directly before he has grown up or something, Orgrim never thought about it this way. In fact, most people who can get to Orgrim's level will face the challenges in the future with a positive attitude. If the other party doesn't come to your door, or provokes you, or is instinctively disgusted, then in the absence of a conflict of real interests, few big bosses will do something inexplicable like "this person is likely to threaten me in the future" reason, just kill the seedling of the other party. Because this is too cheap, and it is difficult for people with this kind of mentality to become truly strong. Because this kind of person is afraid of other people's challenges from the bottom of his heart. He is afraid and has no confidence in himself. How can he become the top hero? Therefore, Orgrim knew that Shanks was likely to become his opponent in the future. But he still would not choose to find an opportunity to strangle Shanks to death at this time. He is very confident in himself and is willing to accept Shanks' challenge in the future and defeat him in an upright manner. What's more, why did Orgrim go to sea? The purpose is to compete with the heroes in the world. One more opponent means more fun. This is their strong mentality. Otherwise, why would Shiji, Whitebeard, and Roger cherish each other? Otherwise, why does Kaido have a secret crush on Orgrim? It's because they know that there are too many boring people in this sea, and there are only a few people who can compete with them and bring fun to this boring sea. But just like Orgrim's appreciation for Shanks. Although Shanks dislikes Orgrim, he admits in his heart that Orgrim is a powerful character and has a certain respect for him. Only, he always felt that Mihawk next to Orgrim seemed to want to fight with him from time to time. Is this guy sick? On the Bayou Glacier, Orgrim confessed to Douglas Barrett that he needed Barrett's talents, so he invited Barrett to join the Warhammer Pirates. After Barrett learned about Orgrim's intention, he did not refuse immediately. Instead, he put forward his own request. He hoped to have a match with Orgrim. If he lost, there would be nothing to say. He was completely willing to play for Orgrim. But at the same time, Orgrim also wanted to help him practice and improve his personal strength. If one day in the future, his strength exceeds that of Orgrim, either he will be the leader of the Warhammer Pirates, or he will leave the Warhammer Pirates. As for winning, Orgrim gave him the practice secrets of Botchonkan, and then they broke up. If Orgrim does not agree to these demands, Barrett has no intention of joining the Warhammer Pirates. Orgrim was a little strange about Barrett's request. As for defeating him before he would join, Orgrim had already foreseen and prepared for this, but he had nothing to say. But what happened next seems familiar. If you think about it carefully, although there have been some changes, isn't this the same situation between you and Shiji back then? I joined Shiji and worked for Shiji, but I did go with the mentality of surpassing Shiji and inheriting Shiji. However, although he felt a little strange in his heart, Orgrim still agreed to Barrett's request. There is no other reason, but again, if people of their level are afraid of challenges, they should disband as soon as possible and retire as soon as possible. The pirate industry is really not suitable for them. Whether it is against Barrett or Shanks, Orgrim is more confident in himself. He doesn't think he will become the second Shiji either. If you can win once today, you can win 10,000 times in the future. Originally, Orgrim was planning to take action with Douglas Barrett at the Bayou Glacier. But Barrett said that in Bayou Glacier, he could not fully display his strength. His devil fruit ability was synthesized. Bayou Glacier was bare and it was almost impossible to use his devil fruit ability. Of course, if Orgrim wanted to take advantage of the situation, he didn't care. Orgrim planned to convince Barrett from the bottom of his heart, and naturally he was not willing to take advantage of him, so he left the Kingdom of Flowers with Barrett. Barrett was a little strange. He originally wanted to fight Orgrim in the Kingdom of Flowers. As for whether it would bring destruction to the Kingdom of Flowers or something, he didn't care at all. He was a notorious executioner on the sea, and this was not the first time he had committed a massacre. In Orgrim's words, he is the public enemy of mankind, the source of chaos, and the evil skull crusher. He doesn't look like a good guy no matter how you look at it. Rogtown has also killed many innocent people, so he should not care about the Kingdom of Flowers. However, it seemed that Orgrim had a natural affection for the Kingdom of Flowers, so in the end the two of them unanimously decided to change places. Sitting in the cabin, Shanks found that Mihawk kept staring at him, feeling a little uncomfortable. He moved the straw hat on his head, and finally asked, "Hey, why are you always staring at me?" Mihawk's eyes did not waver, and he first glanced at the flat hanging on Shanks' waist. It was an ordinary Western sword, but he felt that the sword was of extraordinary quality. Then he said, "Are you a swordsman?" That's right," Shanks nodded and responded. I have been looking for someone who can make progress with me in swordsmanship. Previously I thought it was Orgrim, but this guy was unwilling to practice swordsmanship anyway, so I gave up on him later, and now, I found you, Mihawk said softly. The so-called common progress does not mean that they want to hang out together, but it refers to the opponent that Mihawk believes can continue to be strong with him in the way of swordsmanship in the future. Shanks was silent at first after hearing this. After a moment, his eyes lit up and he said, in other words, you are not satisfied with Orgrim? That's great. Do you want to join my team? I'm preparing to form a pirate team. Orgrim, who was chatting with Barrett, couldn't help but glared at the bastard after hearing what he said. Mater, why don't you cover up your poaching a little? Are you treating me as a dead person? Mihawk was also a little confused by Shanks' direct attitude, and then he waved his hand without hesitation and said, I am indeed a little dissatisfied with Orgrim. In my opinion, this guy has everything in his body, it's something wrong. Hello, Orgrim complained dissatisfiedly. However, he has never treated me badly, and I am very happy in the Warhammer Pirates. Therefore, I have never thought about leaving the Warhammer Pirates, nor have I ever thought about betraying Orgrim. Mihawk suddenly smiled and said. In fact, when Orgrim invited Mihawk to join, he promised Mihawk that if one day he wanted to leave, he would never stop him. Therefore, Mihawk, if he really wanted to leave now, Orgrim would not break his promise. But he didn't expect that Mihawk would say this, which made him feel very relieved. What's so good about that guy? Shanks muttered something. You bastard, if you beep 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 with me again, I will blow your head off with a hammer, Orgrim cursed at Shanks. Shanks looked at Orgrim angrily, but in the end he was too aggrieved to speak. He also knew that he was no match for Orgrim now. He was just now. It's a bit too much. It really shouldn't be provoked by Orgrim now. After all, Shanks is an open-minded person. After taking a deep breath, he also corrected his mentality and turned his head to look at Orgrim. Mew said, I'm sorry, I just said something I shouldn't have said. It was my fault. Orgrim didn't care about this at first, but Shanks suddenly admitted his mistake, which made him a little strange. He looked Shanks up and down, and couldn't help but said, you can pick it up and put it down. I think you will do it in the future. He will become a famous figure. As soon as Orgrim finished speaking, Shanks had a touch of arrogance on his face and said matter-of-factly, that's for sure, Orgrim, I will definitely go to the New World in the future to challenge you and defeat you with dignity. You. Gee ha 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 ha, don't be afraid of the wind blowing your tongue, Orgrim laughed loudly. Then, he reached out and touched his chin, and said very naturally, very good, I appreciate bastards like you. In this world, only if there are more bastards like you, it will be more interesting. Come on, I will play in Pirates, the Pinnacle is waiting for you. But as soon as he finished speaking, he felt a little strange again. Well, why do these words sound so similar to what Shanks said to that kid Luffy 20 years later? Thinking of this, Orgrim looked around, as if he wanted to find something similar to a straw hat and give it to Shanks to use as a token to satisfy his evil taste. But I touched up and down and couldn't find anything meaningful on my body. Finally, Orgrim turned to look at Mihawk. Mihawk was stunned for a moment, a little confused, not knowing what Orgrim was going to do. Before he could react, Orgrim reached out and grabbed the cross hanging on Mihawk's chest. Then he pulled it off without ceremony. Hello. Mihawk scolded angrily and cursed, you bastard, are you insulting my beliefs? Can you pull me down? The first time we met, you killed 17 or 8 innocent people in the church. I have heard that you occasionally drank without any money, and even mortgaged this thing. Are you talking to me about faith now? Orgrim unceremoniously exposed Mihawk's ugly face. Mihawk glared at Orgrim fiercely, but said nothing. Regarding Orgrim's stinky problems, he has long been used to it. As for the cross, although there is a delicate knife inside, there is nothing precious about it. I give this to you, just think of it as our meeting gift." Orgrim casually threw the cross to Shanks and said. Shanks' expression was also a little confused. He didn't know what Orgrim meant by this. But after thinking about it for a while, he finally did not refuse and put away the cross. Orgrim also had a satisfied smile on his face. "Let you, this bastard, pretend to be a bitch all day long, as if you are a face fruit user. This time, I will pretend to be a bitch for you first. Let's see if you can give me face in the future," Orgrim thought with some evil in his heart. A Sledgehammer Breaks into Pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 265. Just when Orgrim was pretending to be competing with Shanks, Douglas Barrett glanced at the sea outside the window and asked, "Where are you going?" "O'Hara." Orgrim laughed and said. "O'Hara," Barrett murmured, and then asked a little strangely, "Why there?" "Because that guy has been scolded by O'Hara scholars in newspapers not long ago, saying that he is an enslaver of civilization and a destroyer of culture, so now that he has the chance, he wants to take revenge, right? After all, if you two fight, you will definitely destroy an entire island," Shanks suddenly interrupted. Barrett listened to Shanks' words and nodded as if he understood a little. Just as he was about to say something, Orgrim raised his hand and hit Shanks on the head. After a while, he said, "Fuck you, who am I, Orgrim, would you care about this with O'Hara's group of academics who only talk?" First, he taught Shanks a lesson. Shanks was so angry that he almost didn't draw his sword and had a fight with Orgrim. Then, Orgrim paused for a moment, looked at Barrett and said, "Nothing unexpected?" "If so, O'Hara will become very exciting before long." "What's the meaning?" Barrett frowned and asked. "Demon-slaying order, the Navy should have issued a demon-slaying order to O'Hara. In other words, it won't be too long before 5 vice admirals of the Navy will bring 10 warships from the Navy headquarters to O'Hara. To me, your synthesis ability should be very powerful in this situation, right?" Orgrim said with an evil smile. Barrett was silent for a moment, then nodded and said, "Yes, in this case, I can indeed exert my strongest strength." As soon as he finished speaking, Shanks was stunned. "What's the meaning? Are you going to fight within the scope of the Navy's demon-slaying order? Are you crazy?" Shanks asked in surprise. "Gee, ha 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 ha, what does a little kid know? Don't you think this is exciting?" Orgrim laughed loudly. Shanks quickly said at that time, "It will not be a true one-on-one duel. The two of you will also face the masters of the Navy headquarters. It will be a battle, there's a fight." "That's right," Orgrim said with a grin. Barrett's eyes also had a look of excitement, and he laughed randomly and said, "Ha ha ha ha, just what I want. The more chaotic the battlefield, the more interesting it is, Orgrim. If you can gain an advantage in this chaotic battle, then I will lose." O'Hara is still calm today, as if he doesn't know anything. At dawn, scholars are going to the Tree of Omniscient one after another to study, and many people living on O'Hara, and everyone started their day's life. The sun was rising, and by noon, O'Hara also became a little hot, so many people on the island like to take a morning break and sleep at this time. At this time on the shore of O'Hara's back mountain, Orgrim and others just got off the boat. With his status, it was naturally impossible for him to go to the port of O'Hara, otherwise he would probably be killed by those bastards as soon as he got off the boat. Did the scholars recognize him and throw rotten eggs at him? Orgrim was too lazy to argue with these scholars. He preferred to find a place to watch a show and watch these self-righteous guys facing the world government. What wonderful expression will there be when raising the butcher knife? It seems that Sorrow didn't appear in O'Hara, and Nicole Albia didn't know where she went. If the Navy is better prepared, their speed may not be as fast as the demon-slaying order fleet. Orgrim looked at the back mountain coast and thought to himself. Hagowal D. Sorrow, the giant vice admiral of the Navy. Logically speaking, he played a very important role in the O'Hara incident. In the end, he was frozen by Curzon and was probably imprisoned in a Navy prison. But this time, due to Orgrim's intervention in the O'Hara incident, the incident broke out in advance, so he didn't know whether Sorrow, the honest giant lieutenant general, had defected to the Navy headquarters. Even he didn't know whether Nicole Albia was dead or alive, or whether the Navy had captured her. But none of this is important. Orgrim doesn't care about their life or death anyway. I don't think this is a place that is going to be killed by the Demon Slayer order. What crime have they committed? Shanks asked curiously as he followed Orgrim. You bastard, why should I tell you? When did your relationship with me get better? Orgrim said impatiently. Hey, didn't you just give me a gift a few days ago? Isn't this getting better? Shanks complained dissatisfiedly. You can guess my thoughts casually, Orgrim said with great disdain. Barrett was also a little curious at this time. How did Orgrim judge that the Navy was going to carry out the demon-slaying order here? Why couldn't he feel it at all? To deal with a group of scholars, the Navy was going to use the demon-slaying order. Magic order? Just when a few people were walking in the back mountains, preparing to find a shady place to rest and wait for the Navy to arrive. Orgrim pushed aside a clump of branches and walked out of the forest. Then, I saw a big tree not far away, and under the big tree, there was a little Lolita sitting. The little Lolita was holding a book in her hand and seemed to be reading. And when she heard the sound coming from the woods after hearing the voice, she also looked up, and then her expression became very frightened as if she recognized something. She was panicked for a moment, and then looked at Orgrim with disgust and spat at him. However, the distance between the two was still very far. This spittle did not spit on Orgrim. It was more of an expression of disgust and disgust. Ha 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 ha. After Shanks saw this scene, he held his stomach and laughed. Orgrim's expression was also a little embarrassed. He had already recognized who the little Loli was. She was the future Nicole Robin. Hey, you are so interesting, what is your reputation? Even a kid like this would spit when he sees you, ha 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 ha. Shanks held his stomach and laughed. Orgrim was annoyed when he saw him, so he didn't bother to pay attention to him. He walked toward the shade of the tree, stood up, and chased the little Loli who was about to run. Go up. Shanks also reacted at this time and quickly dissuaded Orgrim, although we are pirates, she is just a child who doesn't understand anything. When he finished speaking, Orgrim had already caught up with Robin, who was trying to run away with his short legs. Robin also turned to look at Shanks, and while being grabbed by Orgrim and lifted up, she said to Shanks very proudly, I'm not a child who doesn't understand anything. O'Hara's scholar. Shanks was stunned for a moment, but he didn't really understand what a scholar was or wasn't a scholar. Orgrim laughed ferociously, with an evil smile on his face, and asked the little guy Robin fiercely, you little girl, why did you spit at me just now? The two of us are the first. Let's meet for the first time. Are you so rude? Do you want to be spanked by me? Robin was pulled by Orgrim's neck collar behind his head, his feet were flying in the air, and he wanted to grab Orgrim with both hands. Grim's head. While struggling, Robin shouted, that's because I recognized you. You are Khazgarot Orgrim, the enemy of our historians, the bully of O'Hara, and the sworn enemy of mankind, public enemy, destroyer of culture, enslaver of civilization, you are the enemy of all knowledge. As a scholar of O'Hara, of course I will spurn you, the big devil. Demon King? Orgrim was stunned for a moment, then laughed and said, the big devil can eat children. As he spoke, Orgrim opened his mouth, as if he was going to bite Robin to death. However, Robin did not show any fearful expression. Instead, he looked like he was not afraid of death, and said proudly, but Scholar O'Hara, I'm not afraid of you. After saying that, Robin closed his eyes tightly and his body trembled slightly. Although he said he was not afraid, In fact, he was still very afraid. Orgrim smiled, smacked his lips and said, "Tisk, tisk, what kind of brainwashing have these O'Hara people done to their children?" Just when Orgrim was thinking about these thoughts, he suddenly felt a slight pain in his fingers. He looked down and saw that there were several small arms growing on his 2 fingers holding the collar of Robin's back. He was thinking hard. "Spread your fingers. Ha 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 ha, devil fruit user, flowers and fruits." Orgrim smiled. After smiling, Orgrim threw Robin to the ground. Robin looked at Orgrim strangely and asked, "You don't want to eat it, me?" "Gee ha 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 ha, although I am a heinous bastard pirate, I am not in the habit of eating children. I was just trying to scare you." Orgrim waved his hand and said with a smile. Then he didn't mind anything and sat down directly in the shade of the big tree. Mihawk and others also found some stone pillars, or something like that, and sat under the shade of a tree to rest. Robin saw that Orgrim didn't care about her, so she took 2 cautious steps towards the distance, as if she wanted to leave here. After a few steps, after taking a step, Robin looked back at Orgrim and found that Orgrim was looking at her with a smile. This made Robin very embarrassed and angry, and suddenly her fear of Orgrim dissipated. She turned around and looked at her again. He walked towards Orgrim and asked, "Why did you come to O'Hara? Is it because the scholars criticized you in the newspapers? Do you want revenge? To destroy O'Hara? Catch and eat us all?" "I don't eat people." Orgrim reached out and knocked on Robin's little head. Robin frowned and stared at Orgrim for a long time. Finally, not knowing what he was thinking, he suddenly leaned against Orgrim and slapped his butt. He sat on the ground, opened the book in his hand, and continued reading. Orgrim glanced at Robin in surprise. Then he said, "Hey, little girl, what are you doing?" "Read a book." Robin said matter-of-factly. "Why do you want to read here?" Orgrim asked again. Listening to Orgrim's inquiry, Robin's eyes dimmed a little, "Because the people in the village regarded me as a monster, and the scholars should be taking a lunch break now." However, she did not tell Orgrim like this. Instead, she said, "Because I have been reading here. I was the one who came here first. I am a pirate, and now your place has been robbed by me." Orgrim smiled evilly. On the other side, Shanks sat next to Mihawk, looked at Orgrim and Robin strangely, and asked Mihawk, "Your family, is there something wrong with the captain?" "Schizophrenia. One moment he is extremely vicious, the next moment he looks like a close uncle." Mihawk glanced at Orgrim, and then said very calmly, "It's nothing, this is his normal operation." It was obvious that Mihawk was already used to Orgrim's nervousness. He knew very well that if Orgrim was in a good mood, he could even squat on the port and talk to the beggar as brothers and chat happily. If he was in a bad mood, even if Stussy, the queen of Happy Street, came to visit, he would angrily yell, "Get out," or something like that. Now, it seems that Orgrim is in a good mood. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. A Sledgehammer Breaks into Pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 266. Orgrim leaned against the tree trunk and closed his eyes to meditate. Robin sat next to him, flipping through the books in his hands. After a while, Robin will curiously ask Orgrim some questions. For example, how many people has he killed? Why become a pirate? Why destroy Albina, the capital of Alabasta? Where did he get that country next to O'Hara? Can magma really fall from the sky in the New World? Is there really a legendary sky island 10,000 meters high in the sky? Orgrim pretended not to hear some questions, such as the one asking him how many people he had killed. "Just kidding, can you please remember?" Orgrim would patiently explain some issues, such as the climate of Sky Island and the New World. The sun gradually set, and in the afternoon, Hank shot a bison out of the woods. Pirates like Orgrim and others have no other skills, but they are very good at barbecues, game and other things. Several people worked together, and after a while, the bison was skewered and roasted. Originally, Robin wanted to go home for dinner, but Orgrim casually invited her and asked her to stay and have a barbecue or something together. Robin wanted to refuse in her heart, although she discovered at this time that Orgrim did not seem to be as cruel as scholars said, but it always felt like something was wrong, as if I had betrayed O'Hara. But smelling the aroma of the barbecue, Robin still drooled a little. Her mother left O'Hara when she was very young, and she didn't know what her mother did. Later, because of her abilities, she was hated by the people of O'Hara, and many people called her a monster. Before her mother left, she fostered herself in her aunt's home. However, her aunt's family was also very unkind to her. She had to do a lot of heavy housework every day, but only had leftovers to eat. Thinking about it this way, it seems that I haven't eaten meat for a long time. Eat it, and consider it as compensation for us occupying the place where you study. Orgrim casually handed a bunch of barbecue to Robin. Robin was silent for a moment, and then convinced himself, yes, they occupied the place where I study, so I will eat their barbecue. It should be no problem. After comforting himself, Robin reached out and took the roast meat from Orgrim. He felt that there was too much meat and he could hardly hold it. But soon, she started eating it happily. It tasted so good. It would be great if she could eat barbecue more often. Orgrim did not pay special attention to Robin. Instead, he chatted with Mihawk and others, and also talked about the embarrassing things of Pirate King Roger. Shanks is really a bastard. Even his captain is dead. Now when he arranges the funny and stupid things Roger did at sea in the past, he doesn't care at all. He laughs the most. Occasionally, Robin would laugh when she heard the famous Pirate King's embarrassing stories. Suddenly, she discovered that the pirates were not as evil as the legend said. They might be bad people, but they would still laugh and eat barbecue together and chat. Remind some past events. When it was almost dark, Robin said goodbye to Orgrim. Orgrim rubbed his chin and thought about it, but finally did not stop anything and allowed Robin to leave. When it was almost noon the next day, Robin came here again with the book he hadn't finished yesterday. Huh? You didn't go back and tell those scholars that I, Orgrim, was in O'Hara? Orgrim was eating some fruits brought from the ship at this time. After seeing Robin's figure, he asked curiously. Mihawk was sitting in the distance, with his legs crossed. Black Blade Knight was lying on his knees, looking like he was meditating. Shanks was holding a wine gourd in his arms, obviously looking like he had drunk too much, lying on the grass, sleeping soundly. Douglas Barrett was very diligent, holding his hands behind his head, doing squats in a very standard posture. His upper body was naked, and sweat was dripping on the ground, soaking the ground under his feet. And Hank was cooking a wild boar at this time, which he obviously brought from the back mountains in the morning. After hearing Orgrim's inquiry, Robin also walked up to him, his eyes a little staring at the fruit in Orgrim's hand with envy. He then said softly, I originally wanted to tell the scholars, but I found that you are completely different from the pirates I originally thought. I am very confused. There is no need to be confused. The reason why you feel different is because we are in a good mood now. Pirates are very free to do whatever they want. Once something unhappy happens, it will be a different situation. Orgrim said. Will you destroy O'Hara? Robin asked suddenly. Maybe. Orgrim said with a grin. Robin was silent for a moment after hearing this, and then said, Dr. Clover once told me that it is better to have no books than to believe in books. As a scholar, you must always maintain your independent thinking. You cannot blindly follow the crowd, you need to find the truth on your own. I want to find the truth in you. As soon as Robin said this, Orgrim threw a crystal fruit, a specialty of the North Sea, to Robin. You know, this is the West Sea. You can see the specialty of the North Sea, which is fruit. It can be imagined that this common ordinary fruit, how valuable it is. But Orgrim didn't care, it was stolen anyway, and he didn't spend money. Robin had never seen this kind of fruit, and after catching it in a panic, he was a little surprised. Looking at Orgrim. Don't tell me these things. I have no interest in what you think about these issues. Eat it. This is the crystal fruit from the North Sea. It's very sweet. Orgrim raised his eyebrows and said, then took another bite of another fruit in his hand. Robin looked at Orgrim, then looked down at the crystal fruit in his hand that he had never seen before, then nodded and bit into it. The sweet juice squirted out a little, and after just one bite, Robin felt as if he had never tasted such sweet fruit. Very sweet, right? Orgrim smiled, rubbed Robin's head and said. Robin nodded happily and responded. As long as you people from O'Hara don't provoke me during this period, I won't do anything to you, O'Hara. On the contrary, what you need to guard against is not us pirates, but the Navy and the world government. Orgrim looked at Robin, smiled and said. Why? We, O'Hara, are one of the franchise members of the world government. We are an autonomous island and enjoy the protection of the righteous Navy. Why should we beware of them? Robin asked a little strangely. A righteous Navy, Orgrim smiled when he heard this, and then said, as a pirate, I will teach you a truth. Maybe you will understand in the future. There is no real justice and evil in this world. Everything depends on your position, and the final definition depends on your strength. Do you understand? Not understand. Robin shook his head without hesitation. Gee, ha 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 ha, you will understand in the future. As for why you need to beware of the Navy and the world government, why should I tell you? The reason I can mention this to you is because of our friendship over the past 2 days. You can think about the rest by yourself. Little scholar Orgrim knocked on Robin's head. It was still a peaceful day. Robin ate fruits he had never eaten before at Orgrim's place, and he also ate roasted wild boar. In the evening, Hank I also hunted a hare for Robin to eat. It seemed that the food for these 2 days was the most delicious that Robin had ever eaten, and he felt that he had gained a little weight. In the next 4 or 5 days, Robin would eat a rabbit every day. They would all rush to the back mountain at the same time, read quietly, accept the food from Orgrim and others, and then ask some weird questions. If someone was in a good mood, he would answer her. Even for 2 days, Shanks took Robin into the back mountains to hunt, and had a great time. Until the 6th day, Orgrim was in the shade of the tree. Sitting in the lower body, the domineering power on his body was looming. Sitting opposite him in the distance was Barrett, who was staring at Orgrim's condition with an observation gaze. After a long time, Barrett finally determined one thing. That is the domineering power that he is proud of. It is very likely that he will not be able to gain the upper hand when fighting Orgrim, because he feels that Orgrim's armed domineering power is also very powerful. Robin is sitting at this time not far from Orgrim. She stared with her big eyes, staring at Orgrim's figure, as if looking for something. When there was a hint of domineering from Orgrim, after the flash, Robin's eyes lit up and he murmured, there is really something. What is it? Domineering, that is armed domineering, a kind of power. My hawk stood behind Robin at some point and said softly. Robin nodded slightly when she heard the words. Just when she was about to say something, Hank suddenly came out of the woods. Once, he didn't bring his prey. Mr. Hammer, I saw the fleet of the Navy headquarters. There are more than 10 warships in total. They have spread out on the sea. It seems that they are really going to surround O'Hara, Hank said in a deep voice. As soon as he finished speaking, Orgrim, who had his eyes closed and was practicing armed domineering, slowly opened his eyes, and then softly uttered 3 words: demon slaying order. Then, Orgrim looked at Robin beside him, with a slight smile on his lips, and said, "I can't read with you today." "Robin, go ahead and go back to town. Didn't you say that even though is a letter worse than no book? Go and see what the righteous navy is here for." Robin glanced at Orgrim with some confusion, and finally nodded, turned around and ran back towards the town of O'Hara. At the same time, in the Navy's fleet, the warring States General had already chased him. Boarding the demon-slaying order fleet. He held a piece of information from O'Hara in his hand, and looked at the O'Hara island that was already in sight. After all, he breathed a sigh of relief. Call, nothing happened to O'Hara. It seemed that damn Orgrim was not here. The warring States General smiled and said. Poor Salino, who was standing next to him, also secretly breathed a sigh of relief. On the contrary, Jun looked very dissatisfied. If Orgrim came to the West Sea for O'Hara, he would have long ago. They should all appear here. After all, when I was at the Navy headquarters, Orgrim was in the West Sea. If he really took action, why would he be faster than their navy? And with Orgrim in O'Hara, if he landed on O'Hara Island, it would be impossible for O'Hara to still look calm now, right? Therefore, the warring States General has reason to believe that Orgrim's visit to the West Sea this time is not for O'Hara. He finally, "What are you doing?" The warring States General frowned slightly and murmured softly. If Orgrim's whereabouts and purpose could not be found for a day, warring States felt that he could not let go. A sledgehammer breaks into pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 267. Walking on the deck, the warring States General took out a cigar from his arms for a long time, lit it in his mouth, and gently exhaled a puff of smoke and said, "Stop the ship and drop anchor." As soon as his words fell, the Navy went to convey the order, and not long after, the warship stopped. Jun walked up to the warring States General out of curiosity and asked, "General, why don't you come over?" "No, leave O'Hara's affairs to the demon-slaying order. We are here just to guard against Orgrim." The warring States General shook his head. After saying that, Jun nodded helplessly and said nothing. At the same time, 10 warships of the Navy had blocked O'Hara. In Sakaski on the warship, he held a golden phone bug in his hand and glanced at the members of the CP agency sitting below. "Spandine, take your people and do your thing," Sakaski said in a deep voice. Spangdin glanced at Sakaski with some displeasure, but in the end he did not refute anything. He took the golden phone bug, nodded, and led a group of CP members in black suits. "Left the warship? What are you pulling? Do you really think of yourself as a marshal or an admiral? This commander is on the same level as him. How dare a mere vice-admiral dare to order me?" Spandine cursed after walking out of Sakaski's warship. Spandine is the current top commander of CP-9. CP-9 occupies a good position in the entire CP system, so in terms of administrative level, Spangdin is no worse than the vice-admiral of the Navy headquarters. Both parties can be said to be at the same level. If the Navy wants to order him, he can do it, but he has to be a Navy general, right? Sakaski is nothing more than a vice-admiral. He may have a good future, but now he is not even a candidate for admiral. On each warship, people from the CP agency came down, quickly blocked O'Hara, and began to arrest the scholars. Robin ran into the town from the back mountain and saw many people in black suits announcing something. "Attention, all the people of O'Hara, the scholars on this island are all demons who want to destroy the world and are suspects." After Robin heard this, he stopped running and looked at the members of the world government with a somewhat surprised expression. "How can it be? Scholars are the pride of this island. They are the best talents in the world. Could something be wrong?" The people in O'Hara asked in surprise. However, those people from CP-9 had no intention of explaining to them. "Therefore, we will conduct a large-scale search of the entire island. During this period, All people who have no relationship with the scholars will bring their identification documents and wait on the asylum boats in the port, a CP-9 member with a cold face said with a radiophone in his hand. As soon as he finished speaking, the people of O'Hara panicked. Wait a minute, why are we on the evacuation ship? There's no need to go to this point, right? Even if scholars commit crimes, it has nothing to do with us, right? There's no need to leave the island, right? I still have a lot of things at home. The member of CP-9 glanced at the ordinary people gathered around and said unceremoniously, you can do whatever you want. My obligation is only to deliver the notice. If you have your own ideas, that's fine too. Except, of course, do it at your own risk. Then, a commotion broke out, and a large number of ordinary people packed up some belongings and hurriedly ran towards the refuge ship at the port. Robin also came to his senses at this time, and hurriedly ran towards the other side of the harbor. The Tree of Knowledge. As soon as I opened the door of the large library of the Tree of Knowledge, I saw Dr. Clover leading some scholars, as if they were packing something. Dr. Clover, Robin called out hurriedly. Robin? Dr. Clover was stunned for a moment, and then quickly said, why are you here? Quick, get out of here. Doctor, people from the world government and navy are in the town, asking everyone to evacuate. They seem to be doing something bad, saying that we scholars are demons who want to destroy the world, Robin said anxiously. Robin, stop talking about our scholars. From now on, you can't tell anyone who you are as a scholar. You are still young, and those people will not doubt you. Quick, leave here and go to the asylum ship. Dr. Clover squatted on the ground and said softly to Robin. Why? I obviously passed the exam, Robin said very sadly. Stop talking, listen to me, Robin, it seems that the world government is coming for real this time. You also know that we have been studying the historical text. This is a felony for the world government. I have asked you, you are not allowed to touch these, otherwise you will never be allowed to step into the Tree of Omniscience, and now, O'Hara's hope will be handed over to you. You will become the seed of the Tree of Omniscient and O'Hara's future. Leave here and live. Dr. Clover said in a deep voice. His eyes were filled with tears. Doctor, Robin seemed to want to say something else. But before she could finish her words, the door of the Tree of Omniscient library was suddenly kicked open. Then, Spangdine walked in with a group of CP-9 members, looked around, looked at Dr. Clover and said, Dr. Clover, it is a pity that our world government doubts your study of ancient texts and taboo history. Intending to resurrect ancient weapons and bring devastating disasters to the world, so now, you are all arrested, and you are not allowed to resist. What evidence do you have? Dr. Clover still wanted to struggle. A ferocious smile appeared on Spangdon's face, and he said, evidence? When do we need evidence when we are doing things? But if you want to see it, you can, search. As soon as Spangdine finished speaking, the members of CP-9 quickly started searching the big library. Don't mess around. The things here are treasures for all mankind and unimaginable wealth, Dr. Clover said solemnly. Cut the crap and get them out, Spangdon said with a big wave of his hand. Robin seemed to want to say something, but Dr. Clover grabbed her, then they came outside together, and pushed Robin away again. Let's go, don't come back. Dr. Clover said softly. At the same time, Spangdon also walked out. He slowly lit a cigarette, took a puff, and blew out a stream of smoke at Dr. Clover. It's all my fault for you scholars, who spend all your time studying these messy things, which makes me want to cooperate with the Navy, and because of that Sakaski's anger, I even went to a remote place like the West Sea, Spangdon said somewhat unhappily. What are you going to do to O'Hara? Dr. Clover asked. How about it? You know very well whether you have done these things or not. Since you already know that you are breaking the law, you should pay the price for it. Have you ever heard of the demon-slaying order? Spandine sneered. Demon-slaying order? Dr. Clover was stunned for a moment, and then said angrily, this is O'Hara. If you want to kill someone, just kill us, the demon-slaying order will destroy human treasures. Ha 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 ha. Spangdon laughed loudly. Then he turned cold and said in a deep voice, Dr. Clover, the world government has been emphasizing since ancient times that no scholar is allowed to study ancient texts and the blank 100 years of history. But after all, there are countless stubborn guys like you who are following you. Now, the world government's patience has reached its limit, and O'Hara is being taken out to set an example. What do you mean? Dr. Clover said angrily. O'Hara is a sacred archaeological site. If the world government is really determined to destroy the entire O'Hara, it will indeed suffer a lot of losses, but, because of this, it can further demonstrate the determination of the world government in this regard, and also let other scholars around the world see what the consequences will be if they study that blank 100 years of history, Spandine said with a sneer. How dare you? Dr. Clover was trembling all over, feeling like he was sweating coldly on a hot day. Ah, of course, you still have to go through the necessary procedures. After all, we are not pirates. We have to act in accordance with the law and find the corresponding evidence to convict you. Spangdane smiled evilly, and then continued, don't underestimate our CP agency, the hidden basement of the Tree of Omniscient, am I right? Then, Spangdane ignored the scholars and found a shady place to wait for his men to find out O'Hara's crime. Dr. Clover looked at Robin, who had not left yet. He opened his mouth and said, Robin, go to the refuge ship quickly. The matter has come to this. The world government can do anything. No, no one is nice to me anyway, no one likes me, I want to be with everyone, Robin said with some pain. At this moment, a person from the CP agency rushed out and said to Spangdine, Sir, we found a historical text hidden by O'Hara and some related deciphered manuscripts. Ah ha 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 ha. Spangdane stood up suddenly, then laughed and said, very well, scholars, your crimes have been discovered. On behalf of the world government, I declare that you will be sentenced to death. It is really a pity that you are today the world's top scholars will all die here. Although Robin had always felt that something was going to happen before, he still listened to something like the demon-slaying order. Orgrim had said it, and these people had also said it just now. But she never knew what it meant. What did she understand until now? Death penalty? Robin murmured first, and then said to Dr. Clover in a panic, Doctor, will everyone die? Why? Just because of interpreting ancient texts. Little girl, these scholars are demons. They want to resurrect ancient weapons and subvert the peace of the entire world. Come here quickly and don't get together with them, Spandine waved to Robin. He did not doubt Robin's identity. What could a little girl who looked less than 10 years old know? Lie. You're lying, Doctor, they didn't do anything like that. Robin said angrily. Okay, Robin, you can't tell them clearly, so go away. Dr. Clover said. After a short pause, Dr. Clover looked at Spangdine and said, before I die, I want to have a phone call with Wullaoxing. What are world governments afraid of? Ancient weapons. Hee hee, what a joke. Robin glanced at Dr. Clover and then at Spandine. Finally, she seemed to understand the pirate principle that Orgrim had taught her before. Orgrim, yes, and Orgrim. I'm going to ask him for help. He is a pirate. As if some hope arose in Robin's heart, he took one last look at Dr. Clover, turned around and ran away from here. A sledgehammer breaks into pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 268. Holy Land Marijoa. At this time in the headquarters building of the world government, the 5 old stars are listening to Spangdine's report on the other side of the phone. Yeah? The evidence is conclusive. Is it really O'Hara? One of the 5 old stars murmured softly. Yes, it is definitely a capital crime, just waiting for your orders, Spandine quickly reported. That's such a shame, Wu Laoxing murmured. They thought it was Alabasta who was causing trouble, but they didn't expect that bastard Orgrim to surprise them. In the end, it was really O'Hara? But this kind of thing, he had already expected it in his heart. Although he was a little emotional, Wu Laoxing was not too surprised. Dr. Clover, we have heard of your name. You, O'Hara, have made great contributions to the world government and world culture. But no matter what, we can't just watch. You break the law and don't care. The voice of Wu Laoxing came from the phone bug. Dr. Clover didn't look like he was dying at all, but instead said confidently, stop being official, Wu Laoxing. Hello. We must respect the supreme power of the world government, Spandine scolded without missing any chance to show his loyalty. However, Wu Laoxing did not pay attention to this, but continued, this is not official talk. The world needs order, and order needs law. Coming from the mouths of those of you who are above the law, these words are really a bit ironic, Dr. Clover said coldly. Wu Laoxing was silent for a moment and did not answer. Dr. Clover continued, history is a treasure of all mankind. People hope to understand history. This is something that no one has the power to stop. Interpreting historical texts may lead to the resurrection of ancient weapons capable of destroying the world. Even if you have no ill intentions, there is no guarantee that no one will take advantage of your achievements. This is your original sin, O'Hara, Wu Laoxing said softly. No matter what the past history is, it is also created by human beings. Everyone must accept history. As long as we can face it bravely, no matter what it is, it can be solved. Dr. Clover said in a deep voice. The Wu Laoxing side was silent again. The bearded man holding the phone turned his head and glanced at the bald man next to him, his expression a little startled. Has Dr. Clover ruined his brain by studying archaeology? Who gave him such courage? Who said this? As long as he faces it bravely, he can deal with anything? This statement sounds really majestic, but in fact, it is full of innocence. Because of this has our world government protected O'Hara too well over the years? Even to the point of death, do you still act like I'm very reasonable? Incomprehensible, the bald man sneered. If everything could be solved as long as he had the courage to face it bravely, then the world would have been peaceful long ago. Don't talk to our world government about this nonsense. Go talk to it. Let's talk about pirates and the countless villains on the sea. This is just the theory of your scholars, the world is not that simple, Wu Laoxing said softly. Are you afraid of ancient weapons? No. In fact, you are afraid of the truth of history, right? Everything that happened 800 years ago, why did ancient humans carve this history on stones that cannot be destroyed? After thinking about it, we finally feel that because of this period of history, there is an enemy, and this enemy should be your world government. 800 years ago, it was the time when the world government was established, and it was also the time when the historical text was handed down. It also happened to be the time when the blank 100 years of history appeared. We have reason to believe that the blank 100 years of history was created by the world. What the government covers up. Through so many years of research and reading ancient documents and historical texts, we have discovered a huge kingdom hidden in history. Although it no longer exists, it once seemed to have powerful power, but the existence of that country, being covered up, I think, maybe this is the behavior of your world government. I'm afraid that when they faced you, they were already prepared for failure and had a premonition that you would destroy everything, so they engraved their thoughts on the historical text that cannot be destroyed and passed it down to this day, right? Afraid of ancient weapons that will destroy the world? That is just an excuse for you to cover up history. What you are really afraid of should be the existence of that country and the ideas that country wants to convey. It is this covered history that poses a real threat to your world government. What exactly that threat is requires further interpretation, and the key to all this is the name of that ancient kingdom, which is called, Dr. Clover said this. Spangden's expression suddenly changed, and he pointed the pistol at the doctor. He knew that he could not continue to say these words. Otherwise, those of them who heard the answer will become enemies of the world government and be buried with O'Hara. Sure enough, when Spangden pointed his pistol at Dr. Clover, Wulaoxing, who had been silent all the time, suddenly said kill him. As soon as the words fell, Spangden pulled the trigger without hesitation. The trigger was pulled, and the bullet hit Dr. Clover's chest, interrupting his last words. A wisp of cold sweat flowed from Spangden's forehead, and he breathed a sigh of relief. It was such a critical moment. Spandine, demon-slaying order, O'Hara, to be completely erased. Wulaoxing gave instructions softly, and then hung up the phone bug. Spangdine also reached out and wiped a handful of cold sweat, and then without saying a word, dialed the golden phone bug. The ear-piercing scream suddenly erupted from the phone. Came from the command rooms of various warships, and then, the Navy's demon-slaying fleet directly launched an artillery attack on O'Hara. The powerful firepower covered the sea, and in just an instant, the tree of Omniscient was destroyed. It was lit. Spangdane was startled by the artillery and quickly said evacuate, evacuate. The scholars broke away from the control, but did not escape. Instead, they rushed into the tree of Omniscient like crazy, trying to put out the fire. At the same time, they threw countless books into the lake outside the window. In an endless stream the bombardment began on O'Hara's island. Dr. Clover was shot in the chest and was helped by two scholars to sit up from the ground. Looking at the tree of Omniscience burning with blazing fire, he shed tears of pain. Tears. Ph.D. Dr. Clover, who was immersed in pain, suddenly turned his head and saw Robin, who had clearly left just now, running towards him again. Robin. Why are you back again? Hurry and find an evacuation boat, Dr. Clover yelled in surprise. At the same time, in the port of O'Hara, an asylum boat was already crowded with refugees from O'Hara. They also looked at O'Hara's symbol in shock, the tree of omniscientness burning with blazing fire. I don't know whether it was a coincidence or a special arrangement, but Sakaski's warship happened to be not too far away from this port. Wearing a righteous navy hat on his head, Sakaski walked to the deck and glanced at the refuge ship. His eyes were filled with indifference. Suddenly, one of his arms turned into hot lava. Just when the lava was about to drip on the deck, Sakaski punched the refuge ship. Big fire, Sakaski shouted in a low voice. Soon enough, the refugee ship that was originally packed with O'Hara refugees was suddenly completely destroyed by Sakaski's blow. Lieutenant General, the Navy standing next to Sakaski, was confused. What is this? After all the work of eradicating evil, if one of O'Hara's scholars escapes, our actions will end in failure. Compared with the possibility of destroying the world, O'Hara is nothing at all. Send me an order to kill without mercy, Sakaski said coldly. On another warship, Kuzan, who was lying on the deck, wearing an eye patch and dozing, suddenly sat up and looked at the destroyed ship that was about to burn. The exhausted refuge ship. His eyes were full of pain and disbelief. Sakaski. Kuzan roared angrily. As a righteous navy, how could he do such a thing? On the Sengoku Admiral's warship, which was still some distance away from O'Hara, Jun's expression was also very angry. She seemed to also I saw the scene where Sakaski destroyed the refuge ship. The Warring States General's expression was very serious, and there was some pain in his eyes, but there was no sign of anger. Dr. Clover found out as soon as he saw Robin. When the refuge ship was destroyed, I felt cold in my heart and broke into a cold sweat. If Robin had really gone there just now, it's all over for O'Hara. Gee ha 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 ha. A slightly evil laugh reached Dr. Clover's ears, pulling his thoughts out of the chaos. And he also looked at the tall figure standing behind Robin and walking towards him. With just one glance, Dr. Clover was stunned. "Hosgarot Orgrim," Dr. Clover exclaimed. Orgrim was carrying a warhammer on his back, with his upper body bare, looking at the burning tree of omniscience with admiration, and then glanced at Dr. Clover teasingly and said, "Oh? You haven't done it yet, are you going to die? You are obviously so old, but you still got shot, how? Now we know who is the real public enemy of mankind. Who is the destroyer of history and culture. Why are you here, Clover Blog?" Holding back the pain from the wound, he asked Orgrim. "I?" Orgrim smiled and then said, "You bastard scholars who don't know the heights of heaven and earth are slandering me every day in the newspapers, which makes me very unhappy, so I came here to see how you died. How about it? Is it painful to feel all this destroyed? Desperate? The treasure that belongs to all mankind is being devoured by flames. Ah, this really makes me happy. Come on, show your pain and make me happier." Orgrim. Dr. Clover first shouted angrily, and then said, "You also know that this is a treasure of all mankind. Even if we, O'Hara, have offended you, you are still a human being. Stop talking nonsense to me here. You are mistaken. I have been the public enemy of mankind since many years ago. You chose me, idle." Orgrim said with an evil smile. "Orgrim, please help the doctor," Robin took Orgrim's hand and begged. Orgrim smiled, reached out and knocked Robin on the head, and said, "Robin, forget what I taught you about pirates. Does it make sense? In this world, there is no such thing as absolute justice or evil. Everything is about position and strength. My position is not in O'Hara, so I will not save them." "Why is it like this?" Robin looked at Orgrim with some despair. At this moment, Dr. Clover suddenly said, "You should have Robin in your position, right?" Orgrim was stunned for a moment and looked at the doctor with some confusion. "It can be seen that she seems to like you very much. What a pity. I, the scholar of O'Hara, have become friends with you, the public enemy of mankind?" Dr. Clover smiled bitterly. Then, before Orgrim could speak, Dr. Clover knelt down in front of Orgrim, put his head on the ground and said, "Robin is O'Hara's future. It is the seat of O'Hara and the tree of omniscient. Although you are unwilling to interfere with O'Hara's affairs, please save this child. You, as a leader of historians and a world-class scholar," he is now addressing me, "the destroyer of culture, the enslaver of civilization, and the public enemy of mankind, pleading?" Orgrim raised his chin slightly and asked arrogantly. Dr. Clover did not raise his head, but still pressed his head against the ground and said in a deep voice, "As you said, this is my position as the leader of O'Hara." "Gee ha 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 ha," Orgrim laughed loudly, and then said, "Interesting, it's really interesting. It's not impossible for me to agree, but I need you to answer a question for me." "Your Excellency, please speak." Dr. Clover then raised his head, looked at Orgrim and said, "You, O'Hara, are obviously so weak and have no ability to protect yourself. Why do you have to have trouble with the world government? What if we have to study ancient texts and historical texts? Do you have to expose this past history? Really, because, lost your mind?" Orgrim touched his chin and asked. When Orgrim asked these words, Dr. Clover also showed a smile on his face. He covered the wound on his chest with one hand while staggering from he stood up on the ground. He straightened his waist and said proudly, "History is the treasure of all mankind, it can light up the future." Orgrim nodded noncommittally. Then Dr. Clover looked at Robin, with a touch of kindness on his face, and then explained softly, "Robin, if the history handed down from the past cannot be continued, in the next era, it will gradually disappear." Having said this, Dr. Clover looked at Orgrim again, smiled tragically, and said, "Your Excellency, O'Hara never thought of exposing this so-called history. From beginning to end, we wanted to do it? Yes, I just want to protect this voice from the past. It belongs to all mankind. This is the obligation that all historians should fulfill. For this reason, it is not a pity to die. Orgrim crossed his arms in front of his chest and stared at Dr. Clover's eyes calmly. Dr. Clover also looked at Orgrim without any guilt. After a long time, Orgrim suddenly smiled and said, this time, there was no mocking or condescending look in his smile. Although I still think you are extremely stupid, however, I have heard your voice, and I agreed to your request, Orgrim said softly. Please give me some flowers, please give me a monthly ticket, thank you guys. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. A sledgehammer breaks into pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 269. After hearing Orgrim's words, Dr. Clover had a happy smile on his face. In comparison, as a price, I will completely destroy everything in O'Hara, Orgrim suddenly said again. Dr. Clover glanced at Robin, then laughed at himself and said O'Hara is doomed, as long as Robin is okay. As soon as he said this, an evil smile appeared on the corner of Orgrim's mouth. Meaning? Hank, Orgrim called. Hank, who was following him, left and came closer. Master Chewie, what are your orders? Hank asked. Take our cute little scholar away, next, it's my stage. Orgrim waved his hand and said. Robin was stunned for a moment, and seemed to want to beg Orgrim to save Dr. Clover and the others. But before she could speak, Hank grabbed her from the ground. He stood up and said with a smile, follow your will, Master Chewie. After saying that, he didn't care about the crying Robin, and quickly left here with Robin. So, as the leader of O'Hara, is it time to settle the grudge between you and me? Orgrim said as he took off the warhammer he was carrying behind his back and held it in his hand. Dr. Clover felt that his body was getting weaker and weaker, and he would soon bleed to death. Ha ha ha, sure enough, all the books are worse than no books at all. I thought you were a sinner of mankind, but in the end, did you protect O'Hara's seed? Compared to dying at the hands of the Navy and the world government, dying in your hands seems more satisfying to me, the doctor smiled and said calmly. Gee ha 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 ha, you stupid guy, sometimes what you say makes sense. I didn't have a good impression of you at first, but now, I appreciate you a little bit. Let me, the evil skull crusher, the public enemy of mankind, and the destroyer of civilization, personally send you on your way, Orgrim said while raising the warhammer in his hand. Dr. Clover slowly opened his arms, as if embracing the future, closed his eyes slightly, and accepted it all calmly. Drink, Orgrim shouted in a low voice. Then, the warhammer in his hand slammed down on Dr. Clover. The powerful force hit Dr. Clover's head directly without any hindrance. The hairstyle was a bit. The funny head exploded like a watermelon directly under this power, and red and white splattered all over the floor. The warhammer in Orgrim's hand did not stop, and the strong force penetrated Dr. Clover's head. The body until the hammer hit the ground. In just a moment, O'Hara's leader, Dr. Clover, was dead. Orgrim shook the warhammer stained with flesh and blood in his hand with a cold face, and then said softly, the grudge between me and you O'Hara will be wiped out today, and I will shoulder the responsibility of being the public enemy of mankind. The moment he finished speaking, Orgrim swung his hammer towards the Tree of Omniscience. A powerful shock wave erupted instantly, directly blowing the Tree of Omniscience into several pieces. I don't know how many scholars died inside. This sudden movement seemed to have attracted the Navy's attention. Kuzan, who was originally asking Sakaski why he wanted to destroy the refuge ship, suddenly turned his head to look at O'Hara, and then vaguely saw a familiar figure. Figure? Orgrim, Kuzan said in shock and anger. Sakaski also had a ruthless look in his eyes, pushed Kuzan away, and shouted in a low voice, "Enter level 1 alert. Immediately notify the Warring States General that Hosgarot Orgrim has appeared in O'Hara." Gee ha 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 ha, even if O'Hara is to be destroyed, it should be destroyed by me, the public enemy of mankind. Orgrim raised his warhammer and laughed heroically. Then, before the Navy could respond to him, another powerful aura spread out from O'Hara. "This is," Lieutenant General Ghost Spider looked in O'Hara's direction with some surprise. "Barrett, let's decide the winner happily." Orgrim roared. "Just what I wanted," an equally heroic voice came from the back hill of O'Hara. The next second, Sakaski saw a strong figure, suddenly rushed out of the back hill and rushed towards Ogre. "Tom." "The successor of Ghosts Douglas Barrett," Sakaski said angrily. "What are they going to do?" Kuzan was also stunned for a moment, and murmured in disbelief. "It seems that these two guys are going to duel here? In front of the eyes of their Navy's demon-slaying order fleet?" At the same time, the Warring States General has also knowing the situation here, he held a telescope, looked at the scene on O'Hara, and cursed angrily. "Arrogant, what do these damn pirates think of our Navy? Send the order, Lieutenant General, and above, all attack. Hosgarot Orgrim and Douglas Barrett must be brought to justice. The behavior of Orgrim and Barrett can no longer be said to be provoking the Navy. They simply didn't take the Navy seriously. They pressed their faces to the ground and rubbed them, and even peed before leaving. Damn it! The area designated by the demon-slaying order of our Navy headquarters, you actually use this place as an arena?" It was too late to say, but it was fast. Orgrim had never fought with Barrett before. But he never looked down on Barrett. Light, as expected, Barrett's momentum was astonishing as soon as he took action. His powerful momentum rushed towards him, like a wild beast. With an excited smile on his lips, he punched Orgrim. "Gee ha 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 ha, good time." Orgrim laughed loudly. The warhammer in his hand drew out a flower shadow, and when Barrett's fist fell, he also swung it out with the hammer. The fists and hammers intersected, and the two people's indistinguishable armed domineering power was instantly revealed. A powerful confrontation was aroused. With the two of them as the center, the wave of armed domineering spread out one by one. "Drink." "Hey." The two roared at the same time, and the overbearing domineering energy on their bodies exploded together. In an instant, everyone on the island was swept in, whether it was scholars, CP members who had not had time to evacuate, or some naval officers, all in the fierce confrontation between these two overlord-colored domineering energies. He lost consciousness and fainted to the ground. The originally clear sky was affected by the domineering energy, and the clouds were quickly pulled down, and then, as if they were torn apart, lightning flashed thunder. And the warships on the sea were also swelled by the sweeping air waves and waves. "Fire! Go at them and empty all the ammunition for me," Sakaski roared. At the same time, hot magma burned on his body, and a fierce look flashed in his eyes. While the artillery roared, Sakaski also rushed out of the warship. He wants to be here, to wash away the shame that Orgrim brought him, and to bury all these pirates on O'Hara. Orgrim and Barrett are equal opponents. This time the two fight, they will directly. There was a stalemate. And Sakaski's movements were not slow. While falling in the air, he punched out fiercely. The hot magma, with the breath of destruction, seemed to destroy Orgrim and Barrett. "It's like it's all covered. The dog bites the red lotus," Sakaski roared. Orgrim and Barrett were in perfect agreement at this time and at the same time removed the strength in their hands. Orgrim took a step back, and the warhammer in his hand was spinning from his left hand. His right hand just wandered around him, looking very cool. At the same time, when the warhammer rotated to his left hand again, he twisted his waist and exerted force under his feet, directly cracking the ground. At the same time, the warhammer in his hand violently he hammered the ground and swung it into the air. 80, Orgrim shouted in a low voice. The powerful power of the warhammer exploded the magma dog head that erupted from Sakaski. Then, the figure of Douglas Barrett also rose from the ground, and with a sudden movement punched Sakaski. The military power of the source, Barrett shouted in a low voice. Sakaski has indeed made great progress in the past few years. He did not have any entanglement with Orgrim in the air. As soon as Barrett came up, Sakaski's other one hand turned into hot lava and punched him out. A volcanic eruption of power erupted from Sakaski's body. At the same moment, an evil look appeared on the corner of Orgrim's mouth. With a smile, his feet suddenly exerted force, and the figure flew directly to the sky above the two people. Taking advantage of the moment when they were fighting, a transparent impact energy condensed on the warhammer in his hand. Then Orgrim didn't move at all. An unceremonious hammer hit the two of them, as if they wanted to deal with Barrett and Sakaski together. Sakaski and Barrett also changed their moves at the same time, and the two of them slipped their arms and exchanged blows. They staggered their positions, turned around in the air, and all faced Orgrim above. Then, the two of them punched Orgrim's warhammer, one from the left and the other from the right. They hit from three directions. The attack suddenly hit a point. For a moment, in the air, the three of them formed a triangle and were stalemate together. Gee ha 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 ha, so happy, Orgrim laughed loudly. Barrett also had an excited smile on his face. It was really happy. Only Sakaski's face was very stiff, and he wished he could bite the two opposite men to death right now. What a bastard! It was too late, but it was too late. The three of them were in a stalemate for just a moment. Before they could vent their power, a golden light pierced the sky, and a dazzling laser beam hit the three of them directly and accurately. At the intersection of power. Then, a rapid explosion exploded directly, causing the three people's power to lose its fulcrum, and they also exploded together. Orgrim hit Sakaski's body with a hammer, directly killing Sakaski. Kaski was hit in the air and exploded into a magma firework. At the same time, Sakaski also punched Douglas Barrett, and on the other side, Barrett was knocked away at the moment, and also punched Orgrim on the head. It only took a short moment, and then all three of them were blown away by the laser explosion. After falling to the ground and rolling around twice, Orgrim stood up again, reached out and touched his nose. When he lowered his head, he saw that there was indeed blood on his hand. It's really cruel to start with, Orgrim smiled. On the other side, Barrett also stabilized his figure, glanced at the black military uniform that had been burned to pieces by the magma, a smile appeared on the corner of his mouth, and he suddenly pulled off his shirt, revealing his naked body. His muscular upper body. The magma scattered from the air to the ground quickly gathered together at this time, and Sakaski's figure solidified from it. It seemed that he was not injured at all. Orgrim swung the warhammer in his hand and put it directly on his shoulder. He laughed and looked at Barrett and asked, "How is it? Isn't the battlefield I chose good?" Barrett's face was filled with tears. With a smile of satisfaction and excitement, he responded, "Ah ha 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 ha, as expected of you, the source of chaos. A sledgehammer breaks into pirates." Author, Zippo. Chapter 270. At the same time, a golden light flashed, and Porosalino's figure also appeared next to Sakaski. He glanced at Orgrim first and then muttered, "Oh, oh, oh, it's so scary, enemy of mankind. Gee ha 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 ha, Porosalino, it seems that you recovered from your injury quickly, but your memory is not that good. Do you still dare to appear in front of me?" Orgrim looked at Porosalino and laughed. Porosalino looked bitter, shrugged, and said helplessly, "No way, after all, I am also a vice admiral of the navy, a general of the warring states period. We have an order to arrest you." Orgrim raised his eyebrows, and then asked, "Is the warring states period here too? I really miss him." Rogtown didn't say anything either. I still had a grudge with him on the Chambord Islands that I hadn't settled yet. Before Porisalino could speak, a pink figure suddenly rushed from a distance, with a fierce momentum and a cold light. Orgrim, Jun shouted with a sweet voice, unsheathed the Jinpura in his hand, and slashed at Orgrim at an extremely fast speed. At the same time, without saying a word, Sakaski exploded with lava rolling on his body, and suddenly punched Orgrim. "Hell dog," Sakaski shouted in a low voice. Porisalino seemed to have seized this opportunity. His eyes flashed, and his figure quickly dissipated. A golden light appeared behind Orgrim, and he raised his leg and kicked. Kicked Orgrim in the head. Ha 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 ha, Barrett also laughed loudly, without any sense of moral integrity at all, and didn't care whether this behavior was aggravating the situation. He exerted force with his feet, and his huge fist hit Orgrim's chest directly. In an instant, all four masters set their sights on Orgrim. A cheeky smile appeared on Orgrim's face. He raised the warhammer in his hand and blocked it in front of his chest. The next moment, Jun's pretty face with an excited expression was already pressed against Orgrim's face. In front of Ram. The Jinpailau in her hand was also blocked by Orgrim's hammer in front of her chest, and she could not really cut it out. At the same time, Porisalino's light-speed kick also hit Orgrim's head. It was impossible to dodge. A smile appeared on Orgrim's lips, and the surging devil fruit power surged in his body. "Shinra Tianzhang," Orgrim shouted in a low voice. The moment his words fell, and at the moment when Porisalino was about to kick him, a strong shock wave suddenly erupted all over his body. Jun pressed against Orgrim in front of Mew, the black hair was the first to be blown away, and then the slender figure could not withstand the impact and was blown away. At the same time, what happened to Porisalino's kick? He couldn't kick anymore, and the strong repulsive force pushed him away in the blink of an eye. But the violent impact only lasted for a moment. Sakaski and Barrett broke through the impact, and one step forward after a while, the two of them hit Orgrim at the same time. "Iron Nugget Black Gold," Orgrim shouted again. The powerful arm domineering energy instantly covered his whole body, turning his whole body into a piece of pitch black metal. Sakaski's Hades struck Orgrim with a sudden blow on Mew's chest. The hot magma seemed to hit some indestructible iron block and exploded directly. Orgrim's feet scraped the ground and was pushed back a few meters by Sakaski. At the same time, Barrett's fist also caught up. The equally powerful arm domineering fist punched Orgrim on the chest. Then, Orgrim could no longer grasp the ground with his feet. The powerful force directly knocked him away. At the same time, at the moment when Orgrim was knocked away, lava rolled on Sakaski's body, and he punched Barrett with his other hand. Barrett later seemed to have expected it. He swept out with a kick and kicked Sakaski's arm. The moment the two of them fought, magma burst out. No one could do anything to the other, and at the same time they distanced themselves. Before Barrett could stand still, a laser shot through the air. A smile appeared on Barrett's face, and with a domineering look, he swung his weapon in the air and hit the laser directly. He just knocked the laser away and set off a fierce explosion in the distance. Then, Porisalino's figure suddenly appeared behind Barrett and kicked Barrett in the waist. "Go up." But Barrett was also tough. He instantly lowered his body a little, stepped out with his left foot, and relied on his strong body strength to directly withstand Porisalino's kick. "Drink," Barrett roared. While resisting the kick, his arm suddenly swept out and hit Porisalino directly. Fortunately, Porisalino's reaction speed was also very fast, and he crossed his arms, blocked in front of him, put on a defensive posture, but was still repelled. At the same time, Orgrim's blood surged in his chest. After landing, he took several steps back before he stabilized himself. The figure. As soon as he stood firm, a cold light flashed in his eyes. Orgrim reacted very quickly, raised his strong waist back, and became shorter out of thin air. A blade with a murderous aura grazed the tip of his nose. Jun passed by. The person who came was none other than Jun. The sword failed, but Jun was not discouraged. She was faster, and with a movement of her feet, she wiped a trail of smoke on the ground. While stopping her body, she retracted the sword. Another blow from behind Orgrim. Udeo Flo Yuehan, Jun shouted softly. When the sword was slashed, a trace of frosty air came on the blade, and a touch of frosty white appeared on the tips of Orgrim's hair. Jun was about to see it. When Orgrim was cut in half, an impact force suddenly erupted from Orgrim's feet. He was lifted up like a carp in the air, his movements were very dexterous, and Jun's attack that was supposed to cut him in half was, brushing against Orgrim's figure lying almost flat in the air, he waved it out. It was too late, but in just a moment, Orgrim landed on the ground with one hand, and his figure rolled in the air again. Fell steadily to the ground. Jun's great beauty, we haven't seen each other for a few years, right? Do you deserve to be so cruel? Orgrim said with a ferocious smile. Jun didn't pay attention to Orgrim's intention at all. The two swords failed in succession, which made her feel very unhappy. Jinpura drew a flower shadow in her hand and sheathed the sword directly. Sheathed it? Then Jun looked at Orgrim and said with a slightly serious look, idiot, I have only seen Rogtown once. Do you know how long I have been waiting for this day? Ah, really? I forgot about it, gee ha 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 ha, I don't know, I'm not interested, Orgrim laughed loudly. As soon as Orgrim finished speaking, the Jinpura in Jun's hand made a clang sound, and a cold air was seen covering the Jinpura from Jun's hand. The blade was slightly unsheathed by 1/6, revealing a finger-long cold light. Itaruiai white frost mist silver, Jun suddenly shouted. The moment she finished speaking, a blast of frosty air suddenly erupted from the scabbard, obscuring Orgrim's sight. It was completely white, and everyone around him seemed to have entered it. In the first frost. The next moment, in the frost, the murderous intention was even worse. Orgrim only had time to lift his war hammer, and a cold light had already reached his chest. So fast, Orgrim was shocked and said. Faintly, he seemed to see the figure of Jun. At this time, the originally long black hair had turned into the color of silver frost, and the two rabbit ears were straight and straight. Appeared on her head, looking extremely cute. The originally dark pupils turned scarlet, with murderous intent in her eyes. No one knew what happened in the frost and mist. In just a moment, Austrian Grimm's figure suddenly flew out of the frost mist, with a frozen knife edge hanging on his chest. After Orgrim stood firm, he lowered his head and looked at his chest. He could not even feel anything on the wound. It was so painful that he could only see a layer of skin that was turned out, and there was a bit of frost on it. When he looked up again, he saw Jun holding a knife in one hand and walking out of the frost with a mane of silver hair, looking heroic. Has your power awakened? Orgrim raised his eyebrows and asked. Huh, how about it? This sword of mine was completed 3 years ago, but I have never unsheathed it, just to leave this first sword to you, Jun snorted coldly. Orgrim smacked his lips, then smiled and said, then you are really deep and loyal to me, how? If you like me so much, will you destroy those who can't get me? Nonsense, Jun's face became angry, a cold light flashed in his hand, and he slashed at Orgrim again. Gee ha 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 ha, are you too confident just because you hit me with a knife? Orgrim laughed loudly, and the war hammer in his hand suddenly erupted into a wave of scorching hot air. Before Jun's cold-blooded sword fell, it was already swept away by the high-temperature wave and dissipated. Frosty. The wrath of the Balrog, the frost on the wound on Orgrim's chest also dissipated, and blood flowed out again. At the same time, the destruction hammer in his hand, with a scorching breath, hit Jun. Jun raised his sword. Standing in front of the hammer, for just a moment, I felt a huge force coming from the blade, and it was also mixed with the heat. But despite Jun's slender figure, in fact, she is an animal-type phantom beast ability user. Now this ability seems to have awakened, and the physical strength is very powerful. He just blocked Orgrim's hammer, and the heat that spread from the hammer was also mobilized by Jun's power of fantasy beasts in his body. Withstood the frost. In the past few years, I have regarded you as my biggest imaginary enemy. All my training is aimed at defeating you. Regardless of strength or ability, I will never lose to you again. After Jun blocked Orgrim's hammer blow, he said coldly. It's really an honor, but some things cannot be made up for by hard work, Orgrim said as the power in his hand increased. The muscles on her arms surged, and veins popped out. Unable to withstand the strong force, the ground beneath Jun's feet shattered, causing her feet to sink into the ground like nails. Middle. Drink, Jun shouted angrily. Silver-white rabbit fur grew on her arms, and her body shape changed again. Her animal transformation became more and more obvious. At the same time, the power in her hands became stronger and stronger. Orgrim was really surprised at this time. He didn't expect this seemingly weak woman to have such a powerful force in her body. Can you really compete with yourself? Just when Orgrim was still about to use his strength, he suddenly felt a chill in his heart and was about to change his moves. But due to Jun's entanglement, his movements were a little slower. A blue light flashed, and the power that froze everything turned Orgrim into an ice sculpture. At the same time, Kuzan's figure also appeared not far away. One of his hands was pressing on the ground. It was obvious that this was what he had done.